Welcome to Two Guys But One Has a Laptop. Today on Two Guys But One Has a Laptop, I'm your host Noah Barnes, and this is my co-host Quinlan Duvall. We're discussing history's favorite crossover episode, the Cold War. Quinlan, do you want to give some background information before we go completely off script?
That I do. So in the beginning,
There was nothing. Continue.
So during the founding of our country, our founding fathers based the country, the whole ideology of it, off of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which was the ideas from John Locke and his liberal philosophy. Yet, you notice in the Cold War, that all goes out the window.
Oh, totally.
The U.S. government almost was suppressing the right to the pursuit of happiness, and like any liberal ideologies, any liberal ideas at all were sort of disregarded as being just communist.
Commie propaganda, my guy. Well, being opposites in their ideologies led to some minor conflict between the two countries. But nothing really happened of it because, each side had atom bombs, and that doesn't typically end well if they were to go to war. But anyway, today we're going to establish first what the USSR was doing and what the Americas was doing. I say Americas because we kind of went island hopping for a while. Anyway, the USSR had their philosophy based on, as I like to call him, Papa Marx, or Karl Marx to those not infatuated. He had the 10 pillars of communism that they based their ideology off of, which in theory sounds amazing. Their original constitution even gave the right to the freedom of speech, press, freedom of assembly, the right to religious belief and worship, but it's all kind of weeded out over years and years and years of Stalinist regime leaders. But in theory, it's amazing.
Well, in theory, yes. When it was created, the Stalinist constitution was praised the world over for being just about the most democratic constitution in existence, and everyone supported it, except if you look further into it, it really enables a ton of restrictions on essentially every single right that it gives the citizens. Like, for instance, so freedom of speech and assembly, you can freely speak if you have a request, send it in, and have it accepted by a censor.
Basically, yeah. The whole 10-pillar thing, it's like heavy progressive tax, abolition of all rights of inheritance, all that fun stuff. The government owns you. But, it's all good because they'll take care of you now. But the U.S. based its philosophy on John Locke, which they don't credit. At least the USSR cited its sources. The U.S., however, we were all kind of just supposed to know it was John Locke and his idea of life, liberty, and the right to own land. We kind of added in that last part because we don't care what your ideas are. Just as long as they look good on paper, we'll take them. What? It's true.
Yeah.
That's how we got Tesla.
Yeah.
But the whole Cold War bit basically starts in 1947 when Russia, or the USSR, got the rights to own half of Germany. And just...
Rights.
Nah.
They kind of took it.
It's funny that we called it rights, though, because that's the one thing the citizens never really got. But it ended in 1991 because the government failed. It collapsed by
No, really.
Well,
Who could have predicted?
listen, we're a history podcast. We have to give background information. But anyway, to those of you who already knew, we probably look like idiots. But to the 6-year-old watching in the corner, hi. But, yeah, there was a lot of reasons the Cold War started. One, because, you know, the Allies were kind of allowing Germany to rebuild, and Russia was kind of deconstructing it.
Mm-hmm.
But the Soviet Union refused to join the UN. America and Britain feared communist attacks because they hated capitalism. And they had a ton of nukes. One of the largest nukes ever dropped, the largest nuke ever dropped, belonged to the USSR. Not in 1947, but Tsar Bomba, if you couldn't tell the name origin, is definitely Russian.
And they had plans for another one that was 3 times as powerful.
Yeah, so we didn't want to go to war with them, but we were definitely afraid, which was the whole reason we decided, hey, we should just see these smaller countries because they might turn into smaller versions of the other party. So we had like Vietnam, Korea, the Gulf War, a lot of Latin American countries. Argentina, that went well. But anyway, we weren't doing too great with Vietnam, but the rest of them, we did all right because we didn't join them. We aided them, kind of like the Soviet Union did. It's like if there was an image of a bunch of guys throwing money at 2 crabs fighting, those 2 crabs fighting are the same country, but one crab thinks that they should share the corn. If that makes any sense. Quinlan? You understand.
I understand.
And the people at home definitely do. Man, I hope we get picked up by CBS. But, yes, we actually have a list of all the conflicts. Korean conflict, the Tibetan uprising of 1959, Central American crisis, Cuba and Turkey. That was fun. Cuba went full communist, and they were the ones kind of on our tail, while Turkey was on Russia's tail. And we each supplied them with a bunch of nukes, which didn't help the whole thing about us being terribly afraid of the other person's having nukes.
Yeah, the nukes were kind of both an aid and a burden to diplomacy because we both wanted each other to get our nukes out of each other's range. But
also,
neither of us wanted to let go.
We didn't.
We still haven't.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna. But there's also a funny fact about those nukes. We lost 22 of them. Yes, you may find one in Wisconsin. We don't know. But 22 of what we call broken arrows have been scattered amongst the entire world. And your Korean friend across the Gulf might just have access to one of the most powerful weapons humanity has ever created. Fun fact. Anyway, what we were kind of thinking is America didn't really sound like it cared about your right to the pursuit of happiness in this whole Cold War debacle. Now we thought, since it didn't follow John Locke, what were they thinking? Not just in they're crazy sense, which they were. Let's send a dog to space. But in the sense that America, well, any chance the people had to be happy was kind of died out by the fact that we blasted imminent threats on the news almost every day. I love that. But we didn't invest anything in bomb shelters. No, that'd be too simple. Instead, Kennedy said, let's risk everything to show them we're not afraid. Not in the literal saying of that sentence, but essentially, we were screwed if they decided to launch one.
But so were they.
Yes!
So was the rest of the world, which is the only thing that kept us safe.
But here's the thing. Yes, mutually assured destruction. Ah, man, them hoes were indeed mad. But the whole idea of mutually assured destruction wasn't a very pleasant one. And it didn't help people trying to be happy. That's why hippies came up. And the government really didn't care that they were trying to be happy. They hated them. And they tried to put them down every chance that they got by banning just about everything that they did. Even Volkswagen vans. Which you'd think they'd try to help Germany.
Yeah. Well, at its core, the whole fight against communism was supposed to be a reform or a departure from normal capitalist society that would work endlessly to bring some people up at the detriment of others. And yes, it works sometimes, but you have America fighting so hard against an ideology that is really based around making the lives of the common man better and getting them out from under the foot of, giant corporations that are doing everything they can to milk every penny out of you.
Fair enough, but I like Coca-Cola, and they did too, so screw communism.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying communism works. I'm just not saying capitalism does.
Fair enough. Anyway, we were looking at different philosophers to kind of match up with what the whole ideology of America was, and I think we found a pretty good one in a man named Arthur Schopenhauer, the world's greatest cynic and the founder of modern cynicism. Not that Dionysus. We ain't living in barrels. He dressed fancy. This 1800s philosopher basically said, you're not meant to be happy. If you could pull up the exact quote, I'll read this one while you find it. The cheapest sort of pride is national pride, for if a man is proud of his own nation, it argues that he has no qualities of his own, of which he can be proud. Otherwise, we would not have recourse to those which he shares with so many millions of his fellowmen. The man who is endowed with important personal qualities be only too ready to see clearly in what respects his own nation for blah, blah, blah. National pride sucks. It's just a really long way of saying it. And if you like your country, well, then you're insecure about yourself. But that's not really the whole focus of this. It's more the world is not made to make you happy. That's the one inborn error of man. If you look up Arthur Schopenhauer, Inborn Error, you'll come across this quote basically saying that we are born with the mistaken ideology to be happy. And that's kind of what we were thinking. Man. But anyways, I think our time is up. This is Noah, signing off. You want to try Coke?